If you commit a crime, and you go to court and you're having a jury, but when the prosecutor, if you're out to try, he's going to say a lot of things you're going to find inflammatory, controversial, and you're really going to feel like he hates you, or he or she hates you, or speaking anti-you, whatever it is. But especially in the closing arguments, when the prosecutor is addressing the jury, he or she is going to say some terrible things about you. But the things that will be being said basically will be things that are no motivation from the investigation. Put it into a context that the jury can understand and relate to and get a visual. When he or she presents it, you're going to be sitting there thinking a whole lot of negative things about the person making the statements about you, about what you've done, about your crimes, about your past, about you not want for a crime to be proclaimed, to be published. The interesting thing regarding Jeremiah Wright is he just narrated the crimes of not just America, not just of America, narrated the crimes of various empires throughout history. What is interesting, though, is he did this 7 years ago. And the black community, the African American community, they didn't seem to have a problem with it. I mean, they weren't upset. They weren't riling about Jeremiah Wright said this, said that American, he's teaching hate. And these things weren't dealt with. I mean, they were taken in stride. Black people went on to live their lives. Some agreed with it. Some obviously disagreed with it. But it was never an issue. It was never an issue in the black community. It was never an issue in the African American community until white people got problems. They said, hey, we don't like this man saying this about this country. Now, white America went back and dug up a 7-year-old sermon that most of us had forgotten. Most of us didn't even know about. And those who knew about it hadn't paid, was gone over our lives. The white America went back and dug up this 7-year-old sermon and they said, hey, you know what? This man is teaching hate. Then all of a sudden, black America jumps on the bandwagon and starts to refer to as Jeremiah Wright as a hater, as teaching hatred, as being controversial, as speech. The question is, white America, because the issue is much bigger now than the presidency of the United States of America. The issue is the age-old problem that certain people have had in letting other people determine who their enemy is. Who is for them, who speaks against them. Because if we remember well, Martin Luther King was a communist. He was anti-American. He was an enemy to the United States of America. He was funded, influenced, and motivated by communism. And remember, Martin Luther King was a man, as they say, of the cloth. He was a Christian. He was a believer in God. Communism is an atheist doctrine. But they claim, they attacked him as being communist because they did not like what he was saying. And ultimately they killed him. The conspiracy theories are deep. But ultimately, white people killed him because of things he was doing, which they proclaimed were anti-American. One tactic this society has always used since the first people say, you shouldn't talk about slavery. It's always okay for the Jew to talk about the Holocaust and move forward from the Holocaust. But we have a problem with African Americans discussing the African Holocaust, the slavery, the stamp of slavery on this society and on us, and more because we are never allowed to actually go through the therapy to really deal with one of the strategies that was used to maintain the institution. Whenever there rose up a strong black, who spoke out against slavery, who spoke to the intelligence of the slave community, who spoke to the heart of the slave, moral fiber of the slave community, though what that slave was saying was quite controversial and very much against the American spirit, that slave was described as being a crazy nigger. And what they do, once one was depicted and described as being a crazy nigger, then what they did, they set up a barrier, they set a separation between the crazy nigger and the sensible nigger. Of course, to them, the sensible ones were the ones that accepted the standard of slavery, set the slavery status quo, accepted to be good slaves and obey the master, and never bucked the system. Those were the good, intelligent Negroes according to the slave system. And what they did, they were made to feel that they were different or even superior to what was referred to by the slave master as the crazy nigger. Stay away from him. Don't want to be associated with him. So what we see in Jeremiah is the same tactic being used. He's being depicted as, pretty much the crazy nigger. But he hasn't spoken anything that's not true. And that's always my question. I've been asking this since the very beginning. They talk about it being controversial. They talk about it being inflammatory. They talk about it being anti-American. They speak of him as being unpatriotic. The whole 9 yards. But no one is the basic question, the most fundamental question of the whole thing. Is what he's saying false or true? Is the conclusion that he comes to based on a premise that is legit? You can't say the man is rabble-rousing. He's just spewing hateful rhetoric. When he talks about HIV, AIDS being something that the American government could be responsible for, that's not something that was just enunciated by him. That has been thought, maybe a conspiracy theory, but it has been something that has been discussed, talked about throughout the black community for years. And the fact is, often it is compared to the Tuskegee experiment, in which they willingly and knowingly injected black men, with the syphilis virus. And even after a cure for this had been decided, give it to these men. They let them go through the whole cycle of the syphilis disease. But that's not the first time. America has been known for biological and chemical warfare. How do you think they get these things? They just, they have to create them. They have to experiment on them. There's reports where they have experimented on their own military. They're supposed to be giving them vaccinations when they go to war, and they would actually injecting them with certain viruses to see how these viruses would, what type of reaction their bodies would have to these viruses. And this goes on and on. But the real issue that I would like people to think about is, why is it that black America had no problem with Jeremiah Wright as one of the top 10 in the country, one of the top 10 black ministers in the country, who incidentally is quite patriotic because he served Marines and the Navy right after segregation. That wasn't an easy job. You figure most of you would have. If they got out of the Marines, they went to. He turned around and enlisted in the Navy, and actually was so patriotic that he was one of the ones that worked in the recovery room when President of the United States Johnson was receiving a surgery. So to talk about him not being patriotic, that's very interesting to take this man and say, oh, he's not patriotic, because he has reserved the right, he has put his life on the line, and reserved the right to criticize the things in America that he sees as wrong. What is un-American, what is unpatriotic, is for those who say, oh, you can't criticize America at all. Just to give you a clue. Let's say your mouth is hurting, you got a bad tooth in your mouth, and you go to the dentist. When you go to the dentist, and you make the dentist feel like, okay, I can't say anything bad about this person's mouth because they're going to feel offended. So instead of the dentist dealing with the tooth that's causing you the pain, that is causing you the trouble, that's really going to cause a disease to develop in your mouth, that dentist talks about all your good teeth and ignores the bad one that really needs to be pulled, because in pulling it, you're going to offend you, especially if he talks about how rotten it is. It's the same thing with America. If you want to cure America and make it the best that it can be, then you have to be willing to criticize it and uproot and pull out the evil that's in it. Quit acting like America, is so perfect in its application of its document, because it is not perfect right now. It's going to take people to make it perfect. It took people throughout the history of America to make it perfect. That's what's going on with all the demonstrations and the protests. The woman had to fight for the right to vote. The black man had to fight for the right to vote. We had to fight for civil rights. Was America perfect back in the 40s, in the 30s, in the 20s, in the 1800s? You had the same people running around the world talking about how good America was as early as then. So, but it took people willing to do the evils in America to extricate those wrongs and evils and make America a better place.